23-year-old Jay Rosenkrantz of New York City is one of the most successful no-limit hold'em cash game players online. He plays as Prinny Raid at the shorthanded no-limit tables on Full Tilt, and he once earned $1 million in a single month. He is known as Krantz in the online forums and the online poker community, and he once authored an instructional DVD set titled Krantz's Short-Handed No-Limit Hold'em. Rosenkrantz often tops or comes close to topping the cash game leaderboards through his aggressive, fearless style and his uncanny ability to put opponents on hands. In fact, he topped one such leaderboard for no-limit hold'em cash game winnings for all of 2007, earning twice the amount of money compared to the player in the second place position after only 218 hours and 34,343 hands of play. We have Jay on the phone today to talk to us about how he got started and how he got to where he is now. We'll also try to get to the bottom of the most effective methods for hand reading. All right, so how you doing, Jay?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing really good. Well, first off, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you did before poker and how you got started with poker in the first place.
Okay, well, I've been playing poker forever, probably since I was 12, maybe. I think I was like 13 when Rounders came out, and I got completely addicted to Texas Hold'em. So before poker, I was probably waiting for something as beautiful and addictive to come into my life. But among those years since, I've done everything. I've waited tables, cleaned tents once, as an editorial assistant, did freelance writing. I worked in a mouse pad cutting factory at one point. So kind of a jack of all trades before poker.
Okay. Well, what stakes did you start at when you started really getting into poker?
I started out online. That was probably when I was really getting into it, like 1-2 no limit. Had absolutely horrible bankroll management, though, so I went broke 7 or 8 times.
What kind of bankroll did you have?
Taking shots at the big limits before I kind of found my stride and managed to actively manage a bankroll.
What kind of bankroll did you have that you're saying that you were practicing kind of poor bankroll management?
My bankroll would probably be everything I had to my name, which was in play online at multiple times.
It was one of those.
So if I was playing 3-6 no limit, I had $600 to my name, and I'd run it up or down, and then have to start over.
It's never a good idea to play your life roll as your bankroll.
No, I was definitely not very intelligent about those things back then. And going broke is not fun. So once I learned my lesson and managed to maintain a win and start actually studying the game from like an academic standpoint, I was really worried about going broke. So then I would take fewer and fewer shots and be a lot more, I guess you'd say, nitty about my bankroll.
Okay, well, what do you play now? What stakes?
Anywhere from 5-10 no limit to 300-600 no limit. Just shorthanded usually. I'll play full ring now and then, but shorthanded heads up. And depending on how the games are, I'm not going to sit in at 300-600 no limit against Antonius or somebody really tough. And if I feel like playing poker at that point, I'll play like 5-10 or 10-20 or 25-50.
Okay. Well, how long did it take you then to go from 1-2 to something like 300-600?
Yeah, I moved up to 5,100 no limit then in April, and I was pretty fortuitous, and I didn't have to stay there long. I took some pretty good shots at 100, 200, ran really well, and then benefited from just a surplus of amazing games at 200, 400 no limit and 300, 600 no limit from May through the World Series and up till about September before they dried out a little bit. And I did really well in those games, so I was able to kind of stay at 200, 400, 300, 600, and that's kind of where I am now. If the games are going to be good, I'll be found there, I guess.
Okay. Well, you say it was kind of a slow grind, but you're still only 23 years old, so that's still relatively quick.
But I guess if you look at it like that, yes, objectively, I am young. But I think in as far as like an online poker player's life, on the older side of the spectrum. A lot of these people who are playing are between 19 and 21. And just being an online player, you get in so many hands if you're playing day in and day out. So if I was playing the same amount of hands and moving up in a card room, I could be 30 before I had this kind of success, but I can get that many more hands quicker just by playing every day online, multiple tables, and so on.
Okay. Well, what's the most that you've ever won in a single day?
I guess it's kind of messed up that I can't actually remember how much, but I know I have won more than 200,000 in one day at cash games, but I can't remember. It's definitely less than 4 or 5 times, and I cannot remember the exact number, but that is probably it, and that's kind of a testament, I guess, to how weird my life is now at 23.
Well, how much have you lost in a single day?
I've lost probably between 100 and 200,000 in a day.
Okay, so about the same kind of range.
Yeah.
What's the longest losing streak you've had?
Longest losing streak I've had, I don't know, I've had 100,000 hand break-even stretches, numerous throughout my career. Losing streak, it's hard to say. Possibly 2 or 3 months, but it's normally a result of me playing poorly in some way. And the way I am with losing streaks is that if I start losing, I just hate playing poker, so I'll take some time off, just take a break completely away from poker, whether it's a week or a month, and just remove myself totally, do some other things, and then when I start to feel myself like really wanting to play again, I won't be looking at it as part of a losing streak. I'll just be looking at it as, okay, I'm even now, you know what, I'm going to start the winning streak, and go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you've been called fearlessly aggressive in a lot of the research that I've done about you online, and I'd venture to say, though, that most online poker pros are described that way, as fearlessly aggressive. So when you're playing against another fearlessly aggressive player, how does your playing style change, or does it not have to change?
I would definitely agree with you that a lot of people are called fearlessly aggressive. I think people need to come up with some new adjectives for a lot of us. But how does my playing style change? I don't know. Fearlessly aggressive, I feel like, is not the way my opponents think about me, because everyone is generally fearlessly aggressive. That might be how I'm described by observers, but my opponents are more thinking like about me as far as overall strategies. How often am I bluffing? How am I playing this session? How often am I, and what hands am I raising from the button and the cutoff? How light am I defending against 3-bets? So my playing style changes, and this is probably where I think I'm in the top percentile of cash game players, is figuring out how to out-adjust my opponents. And that's really what high-stakes games are really about against very good players, is outthinking them. Because everyone knows how to play ABC poker. Everyone knows how to vary their play and balance their hand range dispersion, things like that. But so then where does the win come when you're at a table with a lot of good players? Where does your win rate come from? It comes from figuring out, putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about, well, what they think I'm going to do, and then making sure that I'm one step ahead of that and adjusting to that sort of consideration. So I'm not necessarily changing my play unless it's to reflect that sort of adjustment that I'm going to need to make.
Okay. Well, and that kind of ties in with my next question is, I've heard a lot about your hand-reading abilities. How tough is it to kind of get into a player's head and to be able to read that player's hand when you're playing online?
It's actually deceptively not that tough, because you get a lot of experience putting in all these hands, so you're very familiar with a ton of situations. And like I said, I'm able to sort of put myself in my opponent's shoes a lot, very often, whether it's how tight they are pre-flop or how often they're bluffing post-flop. So if you're able to have a good sense of, both intuitively and then consciously through stat tracking and things like that, if you're able to have a good sense about, well, what streets this specific player likes to bet on, or what cards he likes to use as bluffs, or his bet sizing, or his timing, then it becomes very, very easy. It's harder to explain in the moment, but because you have so much experience playing with these players and these player types, you're able to sort of, your mind is able to understand, well, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense, you're able to do some creative things and make some big calls and nice bluffs.
Okay. Well, can you give us any tips on reading your opponent's hands, like some specific tips?
Well, I would say, okay, put yourself in your opponent's shoes and think about what hands that he could potentially have, and then what hands he thinks that you have, and then when the flop comes down, how those cards affect both of those considerations, and then when the turn comes down, how the turn affects what happened on the flop and those considerations as well. And then, of course, when you get to the river, the same thing. So basically, it's all about putting yourself in your opponent's shoes and thinking about how he plays his strong hands, how he plays his weak hands, and also what he thinks that you have.
Okay. Well, what kind of cautionary advice might you give players who are trying to read an opponent's hand?
Well, I don't know if it's cautionary advice. I like to tell the people that I coach, my students, to just really go with your reads and don't be afraid to get all in. Just as long as you don't beat yourself up over making what turns out to be a horrible call. Because sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right, and you look great making a big ace-high call or something like that, a big bottom pair call. But you just need to be objective about whether or not the call is good and not worry about the result. So I don't know if I would be cautionary. If you're continually making crazy calls and you're losing, then you're probably making the wrong call. But definitely trust your instincts, because your instincts are what got you to where you are, and it's what's going to keep you moving up to higher and higher stakes. Okay.
Well, can you give us like an example of how you might put an opponent on a hand or a range of hands?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so well, for a general example, for instance, you're in the big blind and the button raises, and you have a hand like pocket fives, and say we're playing six-handed or even 10-handed. So your pre-flop, the button's range is any cards that he would raise from the button. So if you have a very, very tight player, his range is much, much smaller than a guy who's very loose and opening lots of buttons. So that's one thing. And then on the flop, let's say the flop is ace-high, and you check to him with pocket fives. Now his range becomes, well, all the hands he would raise with pre-flop, plus all the hands that he would bet on the flop if he does bet, or check if he decides to check. And then more specifically, I have a pretty good example of a hand that I played recently while I was recording a video. The button opened, and I called in the big blind with pocket sixes, and the flop was king, king, 10. And I checked to him, and he fired out a continuation bet of about two-thirds pot. And what I marked in the video was that, okay, now this guy's range here is any king, any 10, or sometime, or all air, all hands that didn't mess with the flop. Because the way the online games have been playing recently, and I can kind of make this assumption, although it's not 100% correct, it's probably right with a high probability, is that this guy would check back hands like pocket nines or pocket eights or pocket sevens because he wants to play a smaller pot because he can't stand the check raise. And he'd check back ace high because that has some kind of showdown value. So I call pocket sixes because right then his range is pretty polarized to either big hands or complete air. And the turn comes a 4 putting up backdoor diamonds, and I check and he checks. So now at this point, he can have a 10 probably, but he doesn't have a king because he would bet trip kings. And he does not have diamonds because most players would bet the turn as a semi-bluff with a turn backdoor flush draw. So now the river comes an ace of diamonds, so it completes the backdoor flush and puts an ace on the board. And I check, and he bets between 1/2 and 2/3 pot. So like I said, back on the flop, most players, the way online games have been playing today, check back ace high, and I ruled out on the turn that he could potentially have a backdoor flush draw, so he doesn't have a flush on the river. So if this kind of player is checking back most ace highs of the flop, and he's betting the turn with trip kings, well then he's got some kind of air that's just using the ace as a bluff card, and I called an 8-jack-7. So that's just an example of, the hand goes a lot quicker online, but that's how I reasoned out the call and how I'm able to put him on a hand like that.
Okay, perfect. Well, how many tables are you playing at once?
Back in my grinding days, I used to play, between 10 and 12 tables, but lately, especially because heads-up games and high-stakes games take a lot more concentration, I'm playing 3 or 4 when I'm playing really high, and 5 or 6 when I'm just putting in a long session over various stakes.
Okay, well, how do you get used to playing that many tables at once?
Well, I remember I used to not be able to play more than like one or two, and then I think it's the action junkie in me that needed to play more. But it's just experience, like playing. You start off with two, play a lot of that, and then you're really good at processing two tables worth of decisions. So you add in a third, and over time you're able to get up to more and more. Heads up, I still can't play more than 3 or 4 at a time, and I think optimally I can only play 2 and to play my absolute A game.
Right. Well, so do you use any like poker tracking software to help you judge players while you're playing?
I use Poker Tracker. I probably use it less than I should while I'm playing, with like heads-up displays and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm definitely a big fan of going in after play and looking at my own hands and looking at my opponents and trying to figure out things based on their tendencies and big hands that we played, and just sort of compiling a mental dossier. I don't even know how you say it. On how they play and file that in the back of my head, potentially make some notes on them online, so I'm able to not fall into the same traps that I've fallen in those specific sessions in the future. I think a good cautionary tale about stats and poker tracking software to a lot of like online players who are trying to move up higher and get really good is not to rely on them too much. I almost sometimes recommend not using them for spurts, just to see, sort of like in Star Wars when Obi-Wan tells Luke to lower the blast shield and just trust the Force. Nice. You know, like it helps you hone your intuition and hone all your pattern mapping and hand reading skills, and it's sort of, the software sort of provides a crutch to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And you don't, especially if you want to play like in the World Series and tournaments, or you want to play live poker, you don't have that. You don't have little hovering boxes over people's heads with green stats. So right. It's definitely good not to rely on them too much, but they are useful.
Okay. Well, who are some good cash game players that may be flying a bit under the radar?
I can think of a bunch offhand that not many people know about. The Evils on Full Tilt, which is Ariel Schneller, and also Vanessa Selbst, who many people might know her from her cash tournament success. Mm-hmm. I think she came in the Final Four in the heads-up tournament in the WSOP this summer. But they both went to Yale. They played in the same games as Alex Jacob, who's a very successful tournament player, and they're just brilliant poker minds. They're not as well known as some of the other guys, but I talk a ton of poker with them. They've definitely been instrumental in my development. My roommate, also White Lime, who I think he was ranked 19th on the year for cash game winnings. He's very good. I think people know about him, but he came in 8th in the six-handed WSOP event this summer. Wilt on Tilt, who is probably my best student, Aaron Wilt. He, I think, over the next year or two, he's going to be making a name for himself in some of the bigger games. He's just somebody who absolutely brutally questions me all the time on every hand he plays and every hand I play, and he's made me better. Mm-hmm. And I've also been learning a lot about other games so I can play in sort of the mixed games this summer, hopefully at WSOP, from Joe Tall, who is one of the oldest live poker coaches, and he's just a great guy, and has taught me a bunch about some of the various horse games. Okay.
Well, that's all I've got for you. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Just want to, if anyone hasn't seen, search YouTube for Weed Brownies. I don't know if what my legacy will be like when I leave online poker, if I leave online poker, but that video will definitely figure prominently in somewhere.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you doing this interview with us. Thanks a lot for calling in.
Absolutely. Take it easy. Good luck, everybody.
And thank you for watching the Online Zone on Card Player TV.